Hi, I'm a landscaper, and this is the Wannabe Composer series. Wow, hot coffee! I need it. No sleep. Oh, still ill. So boring. Anyway, it's been like 3 months. Oh my gosh. Anyway, you don't care about that. Right, so we are working on the Sweet Science of Bruising at the moment. Now, I've had to crack through for quite a while now. And because I'm ill, I didn't go down to the usual. Usually I will go down to the initial read-throughs, I will go down to the initial rehearsals, the blocking, I'll get a feel for the sort of show. Annoyingly, because I was so ill, I couldn't really go down. I mean, A, it's not really the dumb thing to pass on a cold to the rest of the cast. That's not an ideal. And B, I just wasn't up to it, which is very frustrating. And the first time I think this has ever happened to me, and has really impacted this process for me. I cracked on anyway. The director's been super busy, so I had limited kind of feedback, which is understandable and usually not a problem because usually I've got a great idea from the beginning, but this time I was kind of flying a little bit blind. Now, I'd written the overture and I'd sent the overture off. That was received well, really liked it, great. So I thought, okay, so I'm in the right ballpark. And then my plan was, with most of these shows, I'll either write a theme for a specific character, or I give a specific character a set of instruments, so woodwinds or brass or whatever. And I decided to do the latter, so I went with those. And it's a decision that's kind of come back and bit me on the arse a little bit, really. In this instance, sometimes it works really well, because sometimes I'll just make that dominant instrument inside a more orchestral ensemble, right? Whereas this time I kind of stuck to just doing just brass for a specific character or just woodwinds for a specific character. And I've gone back last night to test these, and this is why we test these things like well in advance, and just 60% of it just didn't work. And it's not even that the director's particularly unhappy with it. It's just me. I'm watching it and I'm just thinking it's not right. It doesn't work. It could be better. So I've only got about 4 weeks left before the tech run. So I've got to be ready within 4 weeks, which sounds like a lot of time. You trust me, it is not a lot of time. However, more positive. Gonna try a different approach now. I've seen some of the more detailed scenes. I've got a better idea, and to be fair, the actors are that much further along with their work, so I got a better feel. So we're going to strip it back down. Initially what I'd done is I just scored everything from the start of the scene to the end of the scene. My plan then being is, you chop bits out, because I would just sort of chuck everything in the kitchen sink in first and then come back and break it down a little bit. So that's what I did. So some of which I know definitely doesn't work, so I'm gonna carry on. You can see my little spreadsheet here. You can see we've got a few little notes in here, a few notes that we've done and a few additional things that we've put in. So I'm going to work my way through this spreadsheet, and I'm going to be a bit ruthless with what I think works and what I think doesn't work. So we're going to try and crack on with some new take on it today. So good luck to us, I say. So my plan is to kind of go back to the beginning, work my way through off of the director's notes, and start to compile new tracks. So I'm going to load my original full template, because that's got the kind of core instruments that I selected. But I think what I'm going to do differently now is I'm going to start to add in other instruments, and I'm going to try and pick out a theme for the character. I might still, predominantly use... So the character I'm about to do is Violet. She was woodwinds. I might predominantly use woodwinds for this, but we'll see. We will see. So the first thing I do is have a little read through the script and put my markers in. I'm going to do that again now. I won't bore you with it, but I'm not going to sack off all the stuff I've done because some of it may be useful. Some of it might work in other places. Some of it might, still might work in terms of a track. So I'm going to move everything out of my kind of working folder, if you like, which I think you can see here. You can, good. I'm going to move everything out of my working folder and then put it into a previous folder. So I've still got access to all of it. Obviously the numbering will change, that's okay, doesn't matter. Right, and that is going to mess things up a little bit with some of the audio recordings later, I've just realised, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I think now it's just time to charge through and see where we go. So I'm just going to save this as, to start with, track number 4, Act 1, Scene 1, page 6, a line from Violet. The reason I put these titles in quite with quite a lot of description is for the sound tech guys who will run the whole thing. They need to know the points, and they need to, the points the music's going to be played, and they also then need to cross-check against the script the trigger points. I'm going to get rid of the things I know I definitely don't need for now, because that will save me some processing power. I also, just at a pure guess, but I think this is going to be quite subdued, this bit of music. It's not being particularly fast-paced, so that's okay. I can lower the tempo there. And I think maybe I'm going to use some other, just other sounds. It's got to be Victorian, so I may have a little search around sounds, but anyway, I think just for now, what I'm going to do is just, I read with the metronome, and that then sort of gives me a good idea as to whether it's too fast, too slow. So I'm just going to put this put this marker in. Okay, so I've got my length and I've got my timing. I think they're both pretty good. So I need something that's positive but meanders. So I think what I'm going to do initially, I'm going to look in Omnisphere. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm going to stick with the woodwinds for now. And I need to think of a theme for Violet that will work. The overall thing's in G, so you're going to be kind of comfy in G, maybe D. Needs to be Victorian. And then maybe I'll try and do a melody line or something over the top of that that's hers. I swear, right, there is something about when you hit that record button that your brain just wigs out. It's so funny, every time you could play it 50 times through, absolutely fine, and then the second you hit record, off go your brain cells. Nope, don't want to wait. Right, let's kick this in. Again, I'm kind of doing, I'm missing a D. Am I missing a D? Oh no, it's there, it's just really small. Okay. So I can do functions, fixed lengths to bring all the notes the same. I'm going to leave the velocity as is for now. I've quantized it, which means that it's thrown everything out, as my computer likes to do. I'm just going to move things into their right places quickly. That looks a bit more like it. A little velocity adjustment. The ones that are... that's a nice little starting block. So I've got a reasonable amount of time to cover, so I do not need to build up too early. So I think that's probably a nice little starting point. So I'm going to try and work out a melody line. Now, Violet wants to be a doctor. She's got a bit of money behind her. So needs to be something that kind of reflects that. And then just like that. I mean, the timing was hideous. So, but we can fix that. We can fix that. Can we? Can we fix that? I'm pretty sure you should all be there. Okay, let's see. Turn that metronome off, give me a full idea. Okay, yeah, that's okay. Let's glue those together. And then cut it again so that I've got my loop. I just need to make sure I've not cut off any notes, as if your velocity, if your quantize isn't bang in place, you can sometimes just lose your opening notes. So it's that top one I'm really keen on making sure hasn't moved, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to ultra quantize those. Ultra quantize. Now, I like that, but that is probably too distracting. Hit that record button, didn't I? Right, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to I think what I'll do is keep the first half the same every loop, and then do something different for the second half to add a little bit of variation in there. So let's keep rolling with this for now. That's what I should have done, of course, is copy across multiple ones of the first before layering the second one. That made sense. Basically what we're trying to get across is the conversational difference that's happening in the script between the ladies that are performing. You don't know this because you have the script in front of you. Okay, now I know there's a sort of change up around. Probably let's do the last 4 bars. How does this sit in terms of the end? Bang on, which is really useful. But the last 4, I feel like they need to probably change. They're a little more kind of how to describe it. It's sort of positive change is afoot kind of thing. So I think I wanna try and elevate those. Anyway, I'm going to do 4 more little ends now, just to finish this little sequence off. There. Rats. I was trying to be too clever. Failed. Now I know the aunt starts to speak around this point. Again, this means nothing to you. You haven't got the script in front of you, but this conversation between 2 ladies and their aunt, 2 sisters, I think, and their aunt, wealthy ladies being funded by the aunt, or at least one is. I've already explained that. One wants to be a doctor. I should have explained all these sort of things first. That would have made so much more sense. But I didn't. Crack on. The D there. Okay, I like that as a foundation, so I think this is a nice conversational piece. So, and I think I like the slow build up there, so I think I'm maybe now going to look at bringing in the cello, which I know originally I dedicated the cello to another character, and now I'm thinking I could just use it as some fill. The only thing with cello is it's quite a mournful instrument when it's played long, so I don't know whether I'm going to do. Run it off a few times, see what we think. positive. I need positives. I don't just like it, but okay. I've got a violin. Now the violins in the test in the theatre sounded quite. They were very, very piercy. Not very piercy, but very distinct. They kind of detracted a little bit away from the action. So I just need to remember that for the mixing. I'm going to need to pull down the violins a little bit and tame them. Anyway, again, you don't need to know that. But I've gone at spiccato at the moment. As you can see, the Spitfire BBC Orchestra, which I do like. So I might see how we go. Camera try. Okay. Let's try them long. I don't think so. Again, like the strings are kind of, they're not a positive bouncy. So I may go back to I hadn't thought pizzicato chirpy. Now I've mixed the strings currently for spiccato, so I will need to remix them, but there might be a nice little addition there. My computer didn't fall over and collapse halfway through writing it. You know what? I'm not going to use the piano. Let's remove that quickly. That will save a lot of processing power, he says, hopefully. I'm not going to use that brass. Okay. What I need is other woodwinds, and I'm going to bring in some. I think I'm going to bring in some east-west woodwinds. Let's bring in a couple of tracks. I think like a clarinet for solo. Solo clarinet. Let's try that first. And I'm now starting to think, actually, solo clarinet is so distinctive that actually that might work well with Violet's theme. Can't talk and type. Over in Violet, yep, what I wanted to write was clarinet. Can't talk and type. Can't really talk and do anything, can I? Right. And then, what else do I fancy putting in here? I mean, oboes are nice, but I've kind of got the bassoons already. English horn's quite nice, the cor anglais. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's see what happens. Okay, so clarinet, and then we'll bring it a English horn, cor anglais. Let's see what we got. That's not bad. So that the sister kind of now could have that note. Now all three of them could have their own instruments in effect. I'm not going to worry too much about trying to get the right instrument playing at the right time. They're going to do the lines. That would never work. Could do that for a film. Not going to do it here. With East-West, you've got a number of different trigger keys which allow us to play different styles. Amazing. Okay, I'm going to use that as my starting point, I think. So this is just what I do, but I tend to put in that trigger note at the very beginning before I write anything, so that it will always come back to that. And then if I decide to use any of the other styles, I can play, I mean you can't see my fingers, but you can imagine. Right, so I can use my left hand to trigger anything, and then I can just write it in. Shall we? Let's. I haven't mixed this, so the clarinet's obviously quite loud at this point. I think what we're going to do is jostle between a lot of them. I'll bring the strings back in. What I haven't done with the English horn is work out which one's going to sound best. So, how you see, some of those are really nice for. I like that. I think that keeps it kind of light, so I'm going to go with that for my initial. Where are you? There you are. Okay. Again, haven't mixed this yet, so it's going to be quite loud. What I will do eventually is I will do a combined panner on each of the instruments, and I'll set them where they roughly sit in the orchestra. Right front, right back, etc., etc. And I will mix them so that they sound a lot nicer and complement each other, which they do not currently. Right, let's have both. So with the theatre stuff, it's kind of important that if you're not accentuating a specific point in the show, you keep it kind of the same, or I keep it kind of very similar tone, so the audience kind of starts to tune it out and it just adds to the atmosphere. So I don't really want to write too much variation. I've already done a little bit here in the Violet Woodwind section, so I'm going to keep it fairly straightforward for that. once it's mixed, it will be far less kind of jarring. Okay, and then I'm going to come into the last one of these. I'm thinking in my head. You see, they're having the conversation all the way from this point, and now I want to turn it to being. It goes into kind of being more positive because you know something's going to change for the positive, but with a little bit of but how can it possibly change kind of, so it's a bit tricky. I also need to blow my nose. So I come back, had a little listen, and the only thing I'm feeling like is that as you come through this bit, this one note is a bit jarring as an entrance. And drop the volume of that, only because you think, if you're sitting there watching them play and this comes in and suddenly goes, "Brr," that detracts, right? And I don't want to do that. Once it's in, it's kind of okay. The brain will go, oh, okay, fine, that's happening. But before... So just taking the velocity down, less impact, means the brain will go, oh, it's fine, nothing's jarring here. That's the theory anyway. I'm going to take the volume down on those pizzicatos, and what I'm going to do, I think I might as well do a quick little mix here. I'm going to readjust some bits. Let some of that top come through. And I think the rest is probably going to be okay. Nice. Okay, I might adjust the velocity a little there. I think I may increase the note length. It'll still play the same note length, but it won't cut it too short. So, sweeping V. Make it a bit more subtle. Slightly sounded out of time. Right, and then a little bit of reverb, I think. We'll put a tiny bit more reverb on this. Just extend the decay a little. Maybe the mix a little. I don't really want any of the bass. Okay. Right, and now I'm going to put it into the combined panner. So if you've seen some of my other videos, you can just, online find orchestra placement image and you see where everybody sits. And so because these are the primary violins, they sit front left. So to get those sitting at the front left, I make them quite narrow. I don't know how well you can see this on the right hand side here, but I make them quite narrow, and I want them about 50 to the left because they're at the front left. Second violins sit behind them to the left, and I don't really want it going into the right too much. So, but I also don't want to cut the right out completely because you want a little bit of stereo width. So I'm going to set that to 20. So that's where the violins are going to sit now. The initial woodwind is the lower woodwind, which I think is back centre right, I think. I'm going to check. I'm going to have a quick check. This is just something I found on the internet. I think it's in Spanish or French. Yeah, primos, that sounds Spanish, doesn't it? There you go, and I just use this as a little ready reckoner. So what have I got? Faggots. Okay, there you are. So faggots, bassoons. So it's centre, right, middle for these guys. But they do also do some high. So this particular synth is a combination. So it's a whole bunch of woodwinds from Spitfire. So I need to kind of mix it in the broader sense. So I'm using some of the higher and some of the lower. So what I'm going to do is predominantly tuck it to the right, and so we'll bring it in a little 80 maybe. That's good. Try there. Let's see how that works. And I want the violins to be less dominant. I'll take them down in the mix. A little bit more reverb. So let's do our clarinets. I'm just going to bring my image up again. So clarinettes, clarinetes. There it is, clarinetes. There you are. So they sit central left. Central left. So let's set the clarinet to a stereo combined panner, and then we'll take away most of the right. Just leave a tiny little bit, 10%, 15%, something like that. And then we'll bring it in slightly from the left, maybe 70 because it's not full. That's pretty good. And then we will solo that and then mix this. Oh, I've just remembered I need to replace those two, having changed them. Okay, so clarinets. I'm just going to put EQ. Now I've already I've pre-made myself a woodwind start point. So for clarinets, we're going to want to have a little bit more low end, but we're going to want to sort of shelve off between 400 to 600. So sort of around this area here. Put a little shelf in, and then we're going to want to give them a wee lift. Between 2 and 3, a little lift. And then have a listen. Hope if we could see it. Now some people really like the authenticity of having the air, as if you can hear the player playing it. And some people don't. Some people want to cut all that out. Pure preference. And also when you're EQing, you've got to try and remember what other instruments are playing, right? And so where do you need to create space for other instruments? I tend to get each instrument sounding nice on its own, and then I try and then work out from that, or back from that, to then get everything to sit in nicely. A little bit sharp around this area. Okay, that's not too bad. So I'm then going to drop in a Soothe 2. Again, I think I've built a preset myself for woodwinds. I have. The clarinet's got quite a bit of honk in it naturally, so let's try to lessen some of that. pretty good. And then finally we will drop a little bit of compression over the top to tame it. Again, put myself a preset. I don't really want to curb off lots. No more than sort of 3 decibels. Should tuck it in nicely. That'll do. Okay, moving on to the English horn, cor anglais. I didn't check that in situ, did I? But never mind. I will do. That confident. Right, cor anglais, where's my picture? So, cor anglais. Cor anglais. Okay, tucked in at the right hand side in the middle. So, and it's quite narrow. So I'm going to drop off most of the left. Just a little hint. Yeah. And then we'll tuck it in from the right hand side by about 60, I think, to about 60 rather. Yeah, okay. I'm going to copy across the effects I've done for my clarinet first. It saves redoing them. Put my high pass in. A little bit of weight there. Okay, that's pretty good. Soothe, because again, woodwinds, honky little numbers. Take the edge off. And I'm going to compress this a little harsher, I think. Maybe a little too harsh. Let's put the attack up a little. Okay, and now let's have a little listen to all of them, see if they actually sit together. You got it on the solo first though, yeah? Do a bit of level adjustment. Clarinet's a little too high. I'm just going to compress slightly harder the general woodwinds. Try and catch some of those notes. Okay, that's not awful. Anything I would say is that I've forgotten. No, I haven't. The thing I would say is there's a few notes that I think I will adjust the velocities. This will be quite boring, but I think what I'm going to do is glue them all together, listen to them whilst watching them, and then manually lower the velocity of any of them, because I actually want this main channel to be a little bit louder in general. Okay, so obvious case in point there. So I'll add all these woodwinds to their own specific bus. possibly take the reverb and add it there. Okay, so I'm now feeling like I need coming into the change. So I think we'll run 2 lots of the same here. No, we won't. We'll run 2 lots of that, and then we'll have the clarinet do something that moves us to the change. But I'm going to want something bassy sort of coming in. Now I've got this omnisphere that runs all the way through it, which is kind of like a broken cello. But that is a bit more. It's a bit more sort of suspense. And I don't really want to use the cello. I mean, really, I should just load a bass. I could. The pipe organ, but I don't want the pipe organ because the professor's nowhere near here yet, and the pipe organ is the professor's key instrument. Time for a think, I think. I mean, I could drop a bassoon in.